It's 10 o'clock. Welcome to this session, everyone. So I wanted to cover this because I think for many of us, chanting is sort of a new experience when we get to a yoga practice. We might not have a lot of opportunities beforehand to experience chanting and music in general. I mean, I was lucky enough to be brought up in a musical household, so singing was a regular part of my life, but I know for many people that is actually not true. That's not the case. So when we come into discovering about all the different types of yoga practices, besides the asanas, we encounter this world of sound. And it can seem really intimidating because we don't have a lot of background about the practice, what it might be useful for. So I think it's nice just to sort of cover and to combine chanting with a meditation practice. And as we go through this session, I'll explain some of the reasons why that might be helpful. Maybe like the first chant that we sort of learn in a yoga class is Om. And I don't know about you, but the first time I went to a yoga class and had to chant Om, I didn't really know what I was doing or why I was doing it. And as a teacher leading Om, sometimes there's not a lot of feedback from the students. Lots of students aren't comfortable making sound. And if they're not sure why they're doing it, it becomes even a little bit more challenging. So when we start to learn about these chants in a yoga practice, and if you're sharing them with your students, it becomes really important to let them know why. So let's begin. And I just want to talk about some of the wisdom behind chanting and the power that it has. First of all, if you're not comfortable making sound, I totally get it. And you don't have to make sound to enjoy the benefits of chanting. It is a different experience when you actually start chanting and when you use your voice and when you use your breath. But there's nothing wrong with sitting and listening. And so the exercise that I suggest, if you are in a place, maybe there's like people around you and you've got your headphones on and you just don't want to make any sounds while they're around, then is to breathe with the chant, but to just hear it in your head. So you're taking the same breaths and you're just allowing the sound to be absorbed into your body. So that's a great way to practice chant without actually having to make sound. So why chanting? Swami Shivananda, who is a very, very well-known, famous yogi, suggested that chanting and music is a form of Hatha Yoga sadhana. And what that means is that the act of chanting and the practice of chanting is a form of yoga practice. Why? How? How could it be a yoga practice? Well, we can relate it to a couple of different things. And the first one that I like to talk about is that chanting is sort of like pranayama. So when you think about pranayama, there's this intention behind breathing. There's a regulation of breath of sorts and a use of breath. And that's exactly what happens when we chant, is we're taking probably deeper breaths than we normally would. And then the exhale breaths, where the sound is coming out on, are elongated. So it is, in essence, chanting is a pranayama practice. We could look at it as a pranayama practice. And if you've got through the limbs of yoga and the yamas and yamas and the Eightfold Path of yoga, you might know at this point that pranayama is a preparatory practice for meditation. Traditionally was done as a preparatory practice for meditation, because by using the breath and connecting to the breath in this way, it has this lovely benefit of starting to still the mind. So when we are exploring pranayama practices, so say for example you're doing Nadi Shodhana as preparation for meditation, because it has that cooling and calming effect for the mind, for the nervous system, so that when you sit to meditate, you are likely in, I don't want to say a better place, but maybe you're in a calmer state than if you just sort of been running around, drank your coffee, and then sat to meditate, and all that sort of agitation is still with you, all that energy is still buzzing. So when we engage in a pranayama practice before meditating, we invite into our bodies and minds just a little bit of a sense of calm, of stillness, and then we move into the practice of meditation. And ideally, we are able to drop into a deeper meditative state because of the preparation we did beforehand. So we can also look at the words that we use. So if you think about the idea of a mantra, which is what's happening when we're chanting, if you think about the words that we use when we're chanting, that is a form of dharana practice. So dharana you will know, hopefully by this point. If not, then spoiler alert, it's concentration. And so when we engage in the practice of concentration, and a concentration practice can be as simple as sort of a counted breath, like counting zazen is essentially kind of a concentration practice. And what it does is the word mantra is translated as mind tool. And a mind tool is something that we use to help steady the mind. If you think about your attention and how it's drawn to so many different things, every noise, every sound, every sensation, every thought, your mind is like shifting. And a mantra takes all of that attention and focuses it. It concentrates it like this laser beam. And it allows your mind to be more still. Not that it won't wander, it's sort of you're in this laser beam focus of repeating a mantra, and then every so often there's a thought and it shifts and then it comes back again. And it thought and it shifts and it comes back again. And that's what's so powerful about mantra, is that it essentially, I think it's Swami Shivananda who talks about it as like a deer in headlights. It just gets transfixed, the mind, as much as possible. And I don't want to set up this expectation that when you're exploring mantra, whether it's silent or spoken or sung, that your mind will never wander, because of course it will. It's that you have somewhere to come back to. The mantra is like this beautiful home base. And so from what we know about practices of meditation, we know that mantra is so helpful. There's whole styles and schools and worlds of meditation that are strictly focused on mantra. So TM meditation or Vedic meditation would be another example of this. So that's what's great about chanting, is it combines sort of these different yogic principles or ideas and distills them into a practice that's really engaging, that's really active, and can really help us to prepare for dropping into potentially a deeper meditative state. It also happens to be, for some people, pretty fun. I know that when I've taught trainings in the past, we've sat together in groups, these are in-person trainings, in groups, and we've sung and we've clapped and we've laughed and we've experienced joy and energy and these wonderful states all through chanting. And I cover this in the Art of Chanting course, but there's no requirement to be a singer. I just happen to be someone who trained in music, so I have that background, but it doesn't have to sound like world class. It doesn't have to sound like anything really. It just is sound that your body creates, and we all have different bodies. You know, we have this great sort of sense of acceptance about our bodies in asana, or it's something that we hope to cultivate, is this acceptance of the difference of our bodies and the way the poses are expressed. And I think it's important to remember that about chanting too, is different voices, different sounds, different qualities of sound, different energies of sound, and the more that we can embrace all those differences, then the more we make that practice accessible for other people. Just a side note, one of the great things about this chanting practice is it's part of the Bhakti Yoga tradition originally, and the Bhakti Yoga tradition was sort of a movement away from the practice of yoga being sort of reserved for certain classes of people. And it became more of a sort of a householder practice where it was accessible to everybody who could hear. Anybody who could hear a sound and repeat it would be able to engage in this practice. Andrea just said that her and her daughter are taking some voice lessons, and that's another awesome way to basically practice chant. is to explore music. The music that you grew up with, the music that you love, sounds that you love, anything where you're engaging your voice, your breath, and you're focusing could be seen as a yoga type practice, a contemplative practice of sound and voice and energy and music. So I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Andrea. It's so cool. So we already covered, what if you don't want to chant? Oh, Laura just said, yes, it's so true. Some people worry about not being able to sing or chant in front of a class, and this expectation gets created that because we're a yoga teacher, we have to sound like Deva Premal or, some other great musician, and your voice is incredible the way it is, and it doesn't need to change. And there are ways that we can sort of strengthen our voices, through practice and through correct sort of breathing technique and support technique. But I encourage anyone who loves to sing to just sing. That's really it at the end of the day. I remember once going out, we were on a training in Whistler, BC, in the mountains, and I remember just going out into the mountains and singing, and it felt so freeing just to think nobody was around and no one could hear me, and there was no sort of expectation. And if you have any questions about this type of thing, about strengthening your singing voice or ways to get over nerves, this is what I love to do, and I'd love to help you with that. So feel free to reach out in the comments, because we can definitely talk more about that. So yeah, if you don't want to chant, no problem. Breathe along with the chant. This is great. And if you struggle creating sound, this is super normal. We aren't encouraged to make full loud sounds very often. My first singing teacher equated singing to kind of yelling. It has that sort of cathartic feeling where there's so much sound coming up and out of your body, and it's very akin to yelling, but we're not encouraged to make those sounds, which is sometimes why people love to sing, is because it's the only chance they get to yell. Andrea just said that it feels incredible when the throat chakra is open, and that's essentially what's happening. Is we're creating this pathway, we're encouraging this flow of energy, and it can feel so liberating. It can feel so freeing when you do this. So if you are really self-conscious about making sound, if you can find a space or a room or a place like a park or something where you just don't have to worry about the people around you, then this is a good place to start. So let's see here. So the chant we're going to do today is fairly simple, and we're going to chant it many, many times. And again, you can just listen. You can just listen to the chant, or after a while, you might start to pick up the words. And then maybe you throw in a few words here and there. And then at the end of the chant, we'll explore a meditation practice for a few minutes, just so we can see what it's like to create sound and then to be essentially silent. What those two extremes are like, and how they complement each other. So the chant that we're going to learn it's known as the Pavana Mantra, and it's from one of the Upanishads. And as you continue with your yoga studies, or maybe your beginning or your ending, the Upanishads are a group of texts that are very, very important to the tradition of yoga. And some great chants and prayers have come from these texts. This is the first chant I ever learned. My first teacher taught this chant to me, and it's a really beautiful one because it's a reminder about waking up. It's a reminder about sort of lifting off the veil, sort of those things that get in the way where we maybe can't see super clearly. So the translation in English is essentially, lead me from the unreal, lead me to the real, from darkness, lead me to light, and from death to immortality. So from the unreal, lead me to the real, from darkness, lead me to the light, from death, lead me to immortality. So I will say the words for you. So it's Asato ma sat gamaya, Tamaso ma jyotir gamaya, Mrityo ma amritam gamaya. And then at the end of the whole thing, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, we'll do it about 8 times. I encourage you to sit comfortably, or lie down, or sit in a chair, your feet hopefully on the ground, but if not, no problem. And then close your eyes, soften your shoulders, relax the muscles around your eyes. So I'll begin with an Om, and then I'll move into the chant, and either breathe with me, or chant along with me, or just sit and listen, and we'll see what happens. Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya 2 more times. Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Asatom asat gamaya Tamasom ajyotir gamaya Marityom amritam gamaya Om Shanti 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 keep your eyes closed. And become aware of what it's like to breathe in this body. You might notice vibration or kind of the leftover sensation of resonance in the chest, or maybe in the head, the neck, around the eyes. And as we sit in meditation together for a few moments, you might become aware of any different sensations in your body from when we began the chant practice. Maybe things are a little more open, maybe it feels exactly the same. You might draw your attention to any thoughts that pop into your mind. And then if you get lost in thought, just come back to your breath again. Just back to the feeling of the breath, the feeling of the body. Just for a few moments here. Remembering that if you get lost in thinking, or planning, or imagining, just find your way back into your body again. Back into this amazing instrument of sound. And when you're ready, draw your attention to the sounds around you in the space you're in. Maybe begin to deepen your breath. Bring a little movement into that upper body, especially the head and the neck. You might just let your head start lilting from side to side, or maybe rolling your shoulders a few times. And then when you're ready, just start to open your eyes again. So that's sort of what it could be like. One of the ways that I like to combine a chanting practice with a meditation practice. And if you love chanting and you're super comfortable making sounds in front of other people, this is a great way to incorporate mantra into your class, into whether that's your practicum class or classes that you're teaching to the public or your friends. So finding a chant or a mantra that you really, really love, that resonates with you, that hopefully fits with the theme of your class, and then to explore that together for a few rounds, and then sit in meditation for a few minutes and offer your students or offer yourself a different experience of basically a pranayama type practice or a chanting practice followed by meditation. And for those of you who followed along today, I just invite you to kind of think about maybe how that was the same or how it might be different from what you usually experience. And if it's something that you really enjoyed doing, is there a way to incorporate that into your practice and your classes? Again, it doesn't have to be you chanting. So another thing that I like to encourage students to try is to find a recording of a favorite chant and to practice active listening. So maybe you don't want to make the sounds, no problem. Active listening is where you're really engaged in the sounds and the experience of what you're listening to. So it becomes very meditative, this sort of focus, this, again, that sort of laser focus on something that's happening, in this case, somebody else chanting a mantra, and then follow that by meditation. And the final thing that I would like to leave you with that I found extremely helpful just in my personal practice is that if you have a mind that has difficulty sitting in meditation, so maybe you struggle with sort of just sitting and closing your eyes and being with your thoughts. And this can be true for many of us. You know, we might be experienced meditators, but maybe we're going through something that's quite challenging, and the idea of sitting alone with some difficult thoughts can be quite troubling. It's maybe not the right practice. What you could do is turn your listening to a chant experience into a meditative practice by doing many of the same things. You find a comfortable seat, you find a space where you're able to be for a few minutes, and you play that chant that you love, that makes you feel so at home in your body and at home in your mind, and is just this sort of lush experience for your entire being. And you close your eyes and you actively listen. You fully sort of embody that chant. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your breath, you feel it in your mind, in your emotions, and maybe that's your practice. Maybe that's your meditative type practice, is using sound in a different way. So we can be active participants in the creation of sound, and we can be active listeners in the receiving of sound. And these are all wonderful things that we can explore as we go on our yoga journey, and as we discover more and more things. So thank you for joining me today. It's been my pleasure to explore this chant/meditation practice with you. And this will be up for replay on the Facebook page, and we'll also be putting it onto Vimeo and YouTube, so you can always check out those as well. So again, any questions, pop them in the comments, because I will definitely see those. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much. Namaste.